What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of the supernatural horror film, The Conjuring, Last Rites. And just so you guys know, this video will contain only the mildest of spoilers. But if you haven't gotten out to the theater to see this movie yet, and you don't want to know anything at all that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. The Conjuring, Last Rites is an American-made supernatural horror film directed by Michael Chavez and written by Ian Goldberg, Richard Nang, and David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick. Based on the true-life investigations of the Smurl haunting, made by the Warrens through an original story co-authored by James Wan and Johnson McGoldrick, the film stars Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, who reprised their roles as paranormal investigators, and authors Ed and Lorraine Warren, along with Mia Tomlinson and Ben Hardy. It is the sequel to The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which was released in 2021, and is the ninth and final installment of the Conjuring universe. Chavez returns as director from the previous film, and James Wan and Peter Safran return in order to produce. The Conjuring Last Rites was first released in the Philippines on September 3rd of this year, and was released in the United States on September 5th. And so far, the film has received generally mixed reviews from critics. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the movie has a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 95 critic reviews, and its popcorn meter currently sits at 78% with over 250 verified ratings. The film has a Metascore of 54 on Metacritic based on 26 critic reviews, and it has a user score of 7.4 based on only 8 user ratings. And finally, the movie has a 6.6 out of 10 on IMDb with just over 3,000 ratings. Now, this may be the first true horror film I've been even remotely interested in seeing in quite some time. And I think it's mostly due to the fact that I just don't think that the films that populate the genre are really scary anymore. There's not a whole lot you can do now to scare people these days in a horror movie. Like you could when I was growing up as a kid, you know, Freddy Krueger, Jason, and Michael Myers basically owned our nightmares as children. But what scared us, you know, in 1985, it just doesn't scare people anymore. And so, with that said, a lot of these movies rely on gore more than true horror in order to get over. But I'm a fan of both Patrick Wilson and especially Vera Farmiga. I think she's a fantastic actress. So that's another reason why I put this particular film on my movie-going calendar. And after having seen the film now, I thought the film's opening image was a particularly good choice as it leans fairly heavily into the film being based on a true story. The superimposition of the text kind of explaining, you know, in a rather historical context, what's happening at the beginning of the film. Again, it just helps you kind of remember and realize that this is supposed to be based on real, true events. It also builds on that by going back into the past in order to present Ed and Lorraine's very first case as paranormal investigators, while in the present, and I use present, you know, relatively speaking, because the entire film takes place in the past if you're going to juxtapose it against it being 2025. You know what I'm saying? So, I believe this film takes place in the present. It's 1985. So, of course, when I say the present, I mean relatively speaking. And it connects that case, that being their first case, with their final outing. And just to drive that point home, the film's final image, I think, ties itself to the opening image perfectly, creating both a narratively and structurally symmetrical start and finish, which, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know I like order. You know what I mean? And as opposed to chaos. So I've always told you guys, your opening image and your closing image need to be able to be neatly tied to one another and this film does that a really good job of doing that. Now, as for the plot structure, this film feeling like more the fishy and curve than your typical Blake Snyder by the beat style structure. And you can kind of feel that happen pretty early on by both the beginning of the film and as you're kind of waiting for the beats to kind of drop in Blake Snyder fashion and in order, you kind of realize about 15 minutes in that that's not going to happen. But I think this particular structure worked well in this film because it kept the film moving along as one thing seemed to beget the next, and so on and so on and so on. Things just kind of get ramped up, and one, kind of happening leads to the next happening, leads to the next happening as it builds to a rousing crescendo, which I can say I kind of appreciated, even though I'm more of a Blake Snyder guy. You know what I'm saying? And rightly so, because the Blake Snyder Save the Cat beats prescription is what 90% of the movies use. And so that's kind of what that internal clock that we all have, that timer kind of going off in our heads for when things are supposed to be taking place. That's how come when people say, oh, the movie was paced well, what they mean is the movie went by the beats and the beats happened, pretty much on time. But here, like I said, it's a completely different plot structure. But I think that this particular plot structure served the movie well in this particular case. I thought the small writing was more than serviceable in this particular outing, with the dialogue feeling both natural and connected between characters. I've always told you guys, I like for the characters to talk like people actually talk to each other. I understand that writers have agendas when they come into a scene as the dialogue is concerned, but I shouldn't be able to feel what your agenda is in the conversation. And so the small writing did a really good job of kind of avoiding falling into that trap. Now, I thought the acting was good, but that was expected, especially when you consider the fact that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga have been making these movies together for more than a decade. And so there's going to be a natural chemistry between the two of them that I think should work, and it did work. And I actually thought that the new guys added to that chemistry as Ben Hardy kind of proved himself capable in the genre as kind of, being tutored and, by, Ed. And I thought that Mia Tomlinson was, I'll say, delightfully creepy in her rendition of both the human and possessed version of Judy Warren. Sometimes you'll get these actors that can't necessarily pull off a certain genre of film. Like you might have a serious dramatic actress who can't pull off comedy very well, who's not funny, right? Or you'll have somebody who can do comedy that can't do horror, and so on and so on. But I felt like Mia Tomlinson did a really good job of kind of playing both sides of this particular fence. I was very satisfied with her performance in this movie. And, speaking of the creep factor, because when it comes to scary movies, that's really what we're trying to get at here. This movie isn't, say, for example, Scream. Scream is kind of a horror film with kind of like a comedy twist to it. This is supposed to be kind of true horror, right? Ghosts and spirits and that kind of thing. Serious stuff, right? And I thought the horror elements did their job here. I did think that the demons, the family who appeared as demons, they looked a little kind of Ronald McDonald for me. But I mean, overall, I still kind of felt their presence, how they fit into the film as a whole. The special effects looked, like I said, serviceable. And like I said, there were more than a few of what I like to call anxiety-ridden moments, right? If you know what I mean. And as for whether or not the film was truly scary, I'll just say that if scary movies are really your thing, I think you'll be satisfied with what this film has to offer in that particular regard. I'm not, again, the movie didn't scare me like, oh my God, I was so afraid. But again, I'm not a horror guy. I tell you guys all the time, I'm a drama guy. But, tomato, tomato, right? Now, I did think the film played a little longer than was maybe necessary. But again, due to the plot structure, I thought the pacing was fairly good. So it doesn't hinder the film as much as you might think. And, given that it's the last film in the series of films, you kind of go, I can give somebody an extra 10 minutes to go on ahead and do what they need to do, if you know what I mean. I thought the film returned to the classic formula of the first two films in the Conjuring universe, which it had abandoned to some degree in The Devil Made Me Do It. If you guys saw that movie, that one was a little bit different than the first two. And I also thought that the film had a few fun callbacks to previous films as kind of some fan service for lifelong fans of the franchise, as well as some interesting cameos in the denouement. I don't want to spoil too much for you guys in this particular video, so I'll just leave that there. Now, overall, I'd give this movie a 65%, or a 6.5 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. I'll admit to you guys, I haven't been a horror guy for a long time. Again, because I just don't think that the films that populate the genre are truly scary anymore. But that being said, I did relatively enjoy this film. And I think it's pretty rare for a final film, especially in a horror franchise, to be able to deliver character development on top of a chilling story that just so happened to create what I view as a satisfying ending for its main characters. This film does manage to balance all three of those elements, giving a heartfelt farewell to the fans. And in achieving that, this horror film has my respect. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to go see The Conjuring Last Rites yet? If you have, did you find the film's horror elements to be sufficient? Did you like the callbacks to previous films in the franchise? What did you think about how the film left its main characters at the end? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to this channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe to both my main channel, The Mad Screenwriter, and my new shorts channel, The Mad Screenwriter Shorts, for additional content. In addition, be sure to go and check out themadscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all on the next video.